Welcome to Almost Here, Round the Corner Future Technology Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies poised to transform our lives for better or worse are the focus of this podcast. Almost Here means these technologies are now here and starting to be used, or just around the corner, from Bitcoin to artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Future Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Juliette Labar, and we have with us today Niall Dennehy. He is the co-founder and COO at AidTech. Thank you, Niall, for joining us.
My pleasure, Juliette, and thank you for having me. It's an honor to speak with you and to your audience. I'm a big fan of the show, so great to be on board.
Oh, fantastic. So, Niall, why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of an overview about what AidTech is up to?
Sure. So AidTech, we are a company driven by a mission. We're a company whose mission is to bring social and financial inclusion to the undocumented and the underserved. We believe that the best way to do that is by using blockchain technology and combining that with identity. And I'll give you some context. Right now in the world today, people are always shocked to hear this. There are about 2.4 billion people in the world who are born without any form of identity. And from birth, that means that you are legally, you're socially and financially excluded. And effectively, this might sound dramatic, but you do not exist in terms of how we see society today. So our mission is to change that. We are driven by that mission, but we are a for-profit company. And that's who we are. That's what we're doing.
And, you know, when you say those numbers, it is staggering. And it's something that a lot of people in the world take for granted. Just being able to identify yourself and taking that for granted is huge.
It is. And the way we see it then, if you look at the biggest problems in the world today, we believe a great place to start to solve them is with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 targets backed by 193 countries. And one specific target within goal number 16 is to bring identity to everybody in the world by the year 2030. And what we're doing now, and we have been since day one, is we're trying to speed that mission up. And our mission is to bring identity to all of those people in a much shorter space of time. And by giving somebody an identity, the way we see it is that they can obtain services like remittances, welfare, aid, donations, and healthcare. And that can be done much more effectively than was done beforehand. It can be done transparently. It can be done efficiently. And ultimately, then the people involved, they will have a new source of data, which is their identity, that they have control over, and that they can decide what happens with their identity. And again, that's quite untypical when you look at the web nowadays. And a lot of people believe, we do as well, that identity really is the holy grail of the web, and it's something that hasn't been solved. We believe we're one of the companies who will make a massive impact in that and will help bring identity to people all around the world, especially the socially and the financially excluded, but ultimately then that they've got this form of data that I mentioned linked to their identity, and they choose what to do with that. But it's really a gateway, it's an aggregator, and it's a way for people to get access to services that they didn't have before. And maybe a good starting point, Juliette, for the audience who may not be familiar with AidTech. The reason we did this, and I can come to that story shortly, but ultimately I'll come back to how it happened. But we ran a project in Lebanon in 2015 with support from the Red Cross, based here in Dublin, and we proved that we could issue identity to, in this case, Syrian refugees in a refugee camp in Lebanon, and we were able to distribute aid transparently to them over the blockchain. And the reason the company is called AidTech is you've heard of fintech, you've heard of clean tech, you've heard of health tech, but we wanted to do something that had never been done before. Hence, AidTech was born to bring transparency to the distribution of international aid. That's where it all started, and we realized that a lot of people didn't have identity, as I mentioned, and the number today is over 2 billion, 2.4 is the latest figure. But by proving that we could send aid transparently, we realized that by linking it to an identity, we can send a whole host of other digital entitlements over this brand new, really cutting edge and exciting technology, which is blockchain. And we can bring transparency to that. So ultimately, you as a donor or a government or somebody giving money to a charity or an NGO or even an individual, you have traceability over where the money is going. But ultimately, you can show where funds have been spent.
Wow. I mean, this is such a large problem, but also it's a very difficult problem to solve. And aid tech is creating a lot of solutions that are just really chipping away at this really massive, difficult problem.
Well, we are. And effectively, what we do, and this is where the beauty of blockchain comes in, and the tokenization of items in the real world. With blockchain, with the technology, the way we see it is we can effectively tokenize any real world entitlement. That can be welfare, as I mentioned. That could be aid. It could be remittances. It could be donations. It could be healthcare. But by tokenizing those different items and by linking them to an identity, and that identity then is the control of the individuals involved. You can link all of these different things to different people, and you can make it all transparent. And maybe what might be good is for the audience. Again, blockchain, it's a hard technology for some to understand, but to demystify what it is. One thing that we're doing, it is a difficult problem, but we want to make it as simple as possible to do it so that even the people involved who we're helping don't even know that they are using blockchain technology, and that for us is a good barometer. That if you've got a new technology, that it should ultimately be seamless, and people shouldn't even know what the underlying stack is, the underlying tech is, but at the same time they have to experience the benefits that technology can bring. And maybe one that I'll talk about right now, Juliet, is something that we're doing, and we're really excited about this. And any day now, we thought it might happen today. We are expecting the first baby to be born on the blockchain, and it just so happens that it's going to happen on our blockchain with an amazing partner. They're from the Netherlands, called Farm Access. And what we're doing with them, they're an amazing Dutch NGO. They were set up, I think, in the late 1990s. And they do an unbelievable amount of good work on the continent of Africa to promote health and well-being. And to go back then to the Sustainable Development Goals that I mentioned before, we talked about goal number 3, which is to promote health and well-being for people all around the world. And within that, then there's a specific target, 3.2, which is to reduce neonatal mortality and to increase the health and well-being of mothers. But what we're doing with them is a project kicked off back in April. And what we're doing there is we're sending medical entitlements. That can be folic acid, that can be your prenatal care, that can be postnatal care, antenatal care. And we're using the idea of a blockchain smart contract to automatically send the entitlements to a woman who is pregnant and does hold an ATEC digital identity. And what we're doing is we're ensuring that she gets those entitlements at the right time over the blockchain. They receive an SMS 2 days before they're due to show up at the clinic to get the entitlement. And when they do, then the doctor and or the midwife involved in that process, they verify that they received their entitlement, and which is effectively, again, guaranteed with the movement of a digital asset from point A to point B. And if you contrast that with what they're doing at the moment, they use a paper booklet written in Swahili. When the woman comes in, she gets her entitlement. The doctor or the midwife, they will say that, okay, this woman, they got their folic acid, they got their prenatal care, they got their postnatal care, whatever that can be. And typically then what happens is a few months after the woman has hopefully given birth to a healthy baby, they take that to a processing center in Dar es Salaam, in the capital city of Tanzania. Somebody manually inputs that into a database by a spreadsheet. The data then is analyzed about 6 months after the event has happened, and oftentimes then it's really it's too late. But what we've proven already in the early stages of our project is that we're able to provide real-time data about things that are happening in a remote part of Tanzania, in a place called Kilwa, which is a 5-hour drive away from the capital city. But we've been able to prove right now that the clinic that the pilot project is taking place in, that there was a lack of iron tablets, there was a lack of a drug called mebendazole, and then a machine that had been used to perform hemoglobin tests had been out of action for quite some period of time. And what we found already was that the health officials on the ground there in the capital city, they already have made decisions to say that we need to send more iron tablets, more mebendazole, and we need to fix that machine so that people get the correct care that they're entitled to. But never had that been possible before without blockchain. And the reason that they really like blockchain is that they can trust the shared record of events. That is, it's an incorruptible, permanent, immutable database. But the key thing that we're always want to point out is that the information about the women, any sensitive data, we do not see that. We only see information about the transactions. That is an individual. We don't know who it is because we want people to own their data, to have make it portable and to ultimately do whatever they like with that. But we've proven already it's a difficult challenge, but we are solving it, and we are using a technology that we believe can make an impact. People are owning their data, and it is leading to better outcomes already on the ground in places that were never before possible to reach. So it's a difficult problem, but it's one that we're intent on solving. We're driven by that mission, and that mission that we have is really like our North Star. We get people coming to us every single day of the week, asking us to do different things with different types of, verticals. But our ethos is, if it doesn't align with the mission that we're on, we say no. And the mission that we're on, that is the necessary resistance that we have to guide both the business and the technology roadmap of the company. And that's how we make a decision about what projects, what we do, how we develop the platform, who we work with, and that we're honored to work with them. But if it doesn't align with the mission, we really don't. But hard problem, we're solving it. We have a long way to go. Very few instances of blockchain tech being scaled right now globally, but we're one of the few exceptions to that.
It's so important, as you mentioned, when people have a blockchain identity going with them into the doctor's office, because so often, not just in third world countries, but in all countries, in medical areas, things get lost. There's information that is incorrect, or it's not given, or there's just human error. And with a technology like this, you're going to cut down on that process as well, and just making sure that everyone is getting the exact care they need. And like you're saying, keeping things in stock so that when people do come, they have what they need ready to go.
Exactly. And one of the things we were with my good friend and my co-founder and the CEO of ATEC was with the World Economic Forum in Geneva recently. And we were shocked to find out that they believe that by the year 2027, 10% of global GDP will be stored on blockchain. And we spoke to them and we were saying, what does that mean? How can 10% of global GDP be stored on blockchain? But a lot of it was to do with the efficiencies that it can bring. And one of them, if you go back to the example of that project that I spoke about in Tanzania, which is live right now, if you think about it, the distribution of medical entitlements, if you can map out what the journey is for a woman who's pregnant, what she should obtain, at each step of the journey, and you can automate the distribution of those entitlements, and you can send them out en masse to, potentially millions of women at the point that they're supposed to receive them. It does mean that a lot of inefficiencies, a lot of errors are going to be cut out. I was listening to another podcast I'm a big fan of recently, all about healthcare, believe it or not. And one thing that they said today, was that I believe the fourth highest cause of death in the US, if I can recall correctly, was by people getting the wrong, medication, people making mistakes, which I was absolutely shocked to hear that. But with something like we've put in place right now, if you talk about both the efficiencies from, a technical and an ethical point of view, by linking that then to a ledger that is, cannot be tampered with, and that you can see what happened, who was involved, where it was. It leads to a huge amount of efficiencies, and it cuts out a lot of the inefficiencies, I should say. And it's oftentimes these inefficiencies that cause a lot of the big problems that are just getting in the way. But we do see this as being a way to eradicate the majority of them.
Absolutely, and having that identity that goes with you that shows what issues you've had in the past, what issues you might have in the future, and being able to instantly access that information. As a doctor, that's going to give them a lot of confidence. As a patient, a lot of confidence as well with that relationship in the doctors. So I guess walk us through a little bit about, if someone is gotten their identity and how they get everything set up for the end user.
Yeah, so we want to make it as simple as possible. We realized that a lot of people that we spoke about at the start, when I mentioned 2.4 billion people, they may not have any, they may not have a cell phone or a way to access the internet. The majority of people in developing countries do now have some form of, mobile technology. But effectively, to be issued with an identity in our platform, you can do it in a couple of ways. You can self-provision. You can upload your data. That would then know your customer, anti-money laundering check would take place. But in some cases, we know that right now, I think the figure today is there are about 65 million people globally who have no form of identity whatsoever.
Wow.
Or I should say they're refugees, they're on the go, they're migrants, and that there are, there's even greater numbers, like I mentioned. But for those people to gain access to our platform, they can either self-provision or they can be provisioned by the people that we work with. A simple example would be that could be the Red Cross, one of our partners, or the United Nations, or the NGO that we spoke about, Farm Access. But effectively, what can happen is, if you're an aid worker, you're on the ground and you're in a country, to issue an identity, all you've got to do with our platform is pre-print a QR code that can be affixed to it could be a plastic card, or the card could be printed with the QR code, or the QR code, which is the blockchain wallet address, could be a sticker that can be affixed onto something else like a booklet. And effectively, all the NGO or the charity or the agency that we work with, they take an image of that within our app. And then what they can do is they can attach all of the personal information. I should say they can reference the personal information from that blockchain wallet address, like the name, the surname, the date of birth. And effectively, then a card could be handed over to the beneficiary, and that is their digital identity. And with that identity, then they can both receive entitlements. We want people then as well. One of the things that we speak about a lot when it comes to identity is the 4 Ps. We believe that identity should be personal, it should be persistent, it should be portable, and that you should have power over that data. And personal means that it is unique to you. Persistence means that it lasts with you from birth to life. Portable means that you can take that with you wherever you like. And then having power over that data means that you can choose to monetize that if you wanted to, or to control who can access your data at a later stage. And the other way to get the identity in our platform would be simply to self-provision. We would have a third-party provider would play the role of checking that the individual is who they say they are based on the documentation that they upload, some sort of a biometric check. And then effectively with the identity, it's a blockchain wallet address. And then what we do is we link that. That will act as a reference to your personal data, which can be stored anywhere you want that to be. And if you think about the other P that I spoke about there, about the portability, that would mean information about you can be stored up in the cloud. It could be stored on your cell phone. It could be stored in your laptop. Wherever you want that to be, then that is what's linked to the blockchain identity. So you've got that separation of personal information, which we don't think is a good idea to put that on the blockchain. But we do think that the transactional information should be stored on the blockchain, and that an identity, so that you can be reachable over the the blockchain infrastructure, is the best way to do that. So it means that effectively anybody anywhere in the world can receive an entitlement with a blockchain wallet address, and their personal information, which they own, which is portable, persistent, as I mentioned before, that can be stored anywhere that they want that to be, both now and in the future. And again, we really do want people to have control over their data. And if you are an advertiser, to take that example, or an insurance company or a bank, if you want to gain access to that individual's data, then they are the gatekeeper, they are the controller, they are the owner of the data, and they say and they control who sees their data at any point in time. So that's something that we're hell-bent on ensuring happens at all times, that you own your data.
And that should be a basic right, especially in this new age of technologies, and your data is everywhere. It's still yours, even though it's on, it's out there in the world. It is still your personal data, and that's such a huge thing. So I'm glad you're standing by that in such a strong way.
We absolutely are. We think it's almost like your fingerprint. It's or your iris. It's unique to you. You own it, and nobody else, as your fingerprint, your DNA. It's completely unique to you. And we think that this data is almost equivalent to DNA. And when you're on the web, when you're browsing the web or you're accessing services, we want that data that you have to be almost like your DNA. But you are the individual who's in control at all times.
Absolutely. So if people want to, you have so many things going on. You have so many awards and wonderful, wonderful case studies. What is the best way for people to connect with Aid Tech, to get to know you guys, to answer some questions, and potentially see you in action?
Yeah, sure. A good starting place, Juliet, would be our website, which is it's aid.technology. That's the URL. So aid.technology, that's a good place to start. In there you can find information on our blog, our different channels like YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, the usual. But we're pretty contactable. You can get us at info@aid.technology. Reach out to us on Twitter. I'm at Dennehy Niall. It's my Twitter handle. My co-founder is at Joseph Thompson. We are at Aid Technology on the Twitter machine. And that's a good way to reach us. Drop us a mail at info@aid.technology. And we're happy to connect with anybody who would do us the honor.
That is fantastic. And just so our audience knows, you are hiring. So if people are looking to get involved in that way, you also are hiring at this time. Is that correct?
We are. We recently got investment from both. We're the first blockchain company in the world to be officially invested in by two governments. That is the government of Ireland, the government of Singapore. We got a fantastic Dutch impact investment fund called Blue Parasol. They came in recently. A great guy called Maritz Schouten and his wife Petra. They made an investment in the company, as did Victoria Butt from a firm in China called Tinfu. And Block Acid Ventures out of Singapore, they recently made an investment. So we do have capital. We're looking for great people. We've already got the majority, not the majority, we've got a huge amount of good people on board. We want to hire many, many more so that we can, reach the mission that I spoke about. But have a look at aid.technology/jobs. And we are always on the lookout for good people, especially those driven by a mission, who've got an interest in blockchain technology, who want to make an impact and want to change the world like we do.
Niall, thank you so much for joining us here today on Future Tech Podcast. It has been a real pleasure learning all about Aid Tech.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate your time, Juliet, and thanks to your audience for listening.
That is Niall Dennehy. Niall Dennehy. He is the co-founder and COO at Aid Tech. Find him at aid.technology. Thank you all so much for tuning in. This has been Juliet Lamar with Future Tech Podcast.
You have been listening to Almost Here, Around the Corner Future Technology Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Subscribe to this podcast, post a review to discover more future technologies that are poised to transform our lives for better or worse, such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.